you guys didn't know, I love the Ninja Turtles. If you've been keeping up with the channel, which if you haven't, you should, because I found out that only 2.3% of you guys are subscribed. Guys, if you don't hit the subscribe button right now, I'm gonna lose everything. But what I was saying is we were talking about the Michael Bay Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies, but I don't want the TMNT fun to stop there. It's such a dense franchise with movies, shows, specials, a slew of very interesting canceled projects. I love this franchise, and I want to try to tackle as much as possible before the upcoming Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem releases next summer. So since we already talked about the newest Ninja Turtles movies, I guess we're gonna have to go backwards. I put a lot of the blame of the Ninja Turtles being in kind of a limbo right now on those films. But what was the Turtles franchise like pre-Viacom purchase? Well, we received something very interesting. Yeah, remember this thing? A loved but also somewhat forgotten piece of turtle history despite not being that long ago was the 2007 TMNT animated film. Now like I mentioned, this is pre-Viacom TMNT, but it was also post-Turtle Mania. Them being at the forefront of pop culture was over for long over 10 years at that point, with the last theatrical Turtles film releasing in 1993. But not just that, it would only be a few more years until the 2012 show would launch the Turtles into a renaissance era, if you will. Well yes, around this time there was the very popular 2003 series still running. At the time of this film's release, it was a few years into its run and ratings were slowly dwindling, with the quality of the show also doing the same. While the Ninja Turtles have never been not popular or irrelevant, the Turtles were definitely not at their height at this point. I think a lot of that contributed towards this film being kind of forgotten when it comes to discussion of Ninja Turtles, and the film ultimately not making a lot of waves at its release. But because it's Ninja Turtles, it's naturally going to have some fans around it, people who are going to champion it around. Also, being from 2007, enough time has passed where the kids who grew up with this movie are finally able to express how they feel. In fact, I'm part of this group. Being born in the early 2000s, the 2003 series and the 2007 movie were my first introductions to Turtles. It just didn't make me a fan of them. So while watching the film at release and even receiving toys on my birthday of the TMNT, I liked it, but it didn't entirely click with me. Now that a lot of time has passed, I thought we'd sit down today, take a look at TMNT 2007, revisit it, and see if this is a forgotten masterpiece or somewhat deserved to be forgotten to time. There was not a TMNT movie for 14 years before we got this one, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. Back in the early 2000s, it was actually planned to release a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie with John Woo attached at the helm, but the movie went through a very well-known development hell, with the film eventually being scrapped. And after a few more years of trying to get a film off the ground, in 2005 they finally partnered with animation studio Amaji to bring the very first completely CGI Ninja Turtles movie to theaters. There were discussions on doing another live-action film. In fact, there are a lot of cancelled live-action Ninja Turtles movies before this one, but they settled on doing it all CG to suspend disbelief, which I have my own opinions about, but we'll get to that later. Unlike past Ninja Turtles movies or the ones that would come after, the development of this film was very stable and steady. There was not a lot of behind the scenes drama. The film partnered up with longtime Turtles collaborator Playmates Toys to deliver an extensive toy line, and even got its own McDonald's Happy Meal. Heck, the long-running TMNT series eventually changed its art style to more fit the 2007 movie. A lot was riding on this, not just Amaji, Warner Brothers, and all the people working on the film, but the Turtles franchise as a whole for this film to be a success. So was it? Let's take a look at TMNT from 2007 and find out ourselves. Alright, the Warner Brothers logo, let's go. We're about to watch a new TMNT movie. What's this? The film opens with a narration giving us the Turtles' backstory.
4 brothers, genetically reborn in the sewers of New York, named after the great Renaissance masters.
Who the fuck starts a conversation like that? I just sat down.
That's it? That's all you're gonna give us? This sounds like a casual Friday night acid trip. I mean, just imagine a normal person with no knowledge of the Ninja Turtles going into a film and hearing this nonsense. And this is probably where I should address the elephant in the room. One of the biggest discussions that surrounds this film is whether it is a sequel or not to the previous Ninja Turtles films that came before, this being the live-action trilogy from the 90s. There's evidence of this, such as there being a memento wall that has a bunch of the artifacts from the previous films. Not just that, but Kevin Monroe also stating that the film is in the same continuity as the other films, but there's also a lot of evidence going against this. Turtles co-creator Peter Laird states against this, saying it is not in the same universe, and not just that, but barely anything in this movie calls back or ties in directly to the plots of the previous films. Regardless of if this is a legacy sequel or not, this film was still released 14 years after the last TMNT film. General audiences are by no means caught up to date on the Turtles' backstory. stories, and kind of just mulling over this information like it's no big deal is kind of strange. As a longtime Turtles fan, it's not as weird for us, we know all of this information, so getting right into the thick of the plot is kind of cool, but I think this also handicaps the film a lot when it comes to its characters and overall story, especially because immediately after this monologue, we're thrown into this.
An evil born 3,000 years ago.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Oh gosh, here we go. So, I'm gonna try to sum this up as perfectly as possible. A warrior named Yaddle led a brotherhood whose goal was to conquer every single kingdom in the universe, and then he learned something called the Stars of Kikin, where every 3,000 years the stars would align. It turned him immortal, but then all his brothers turned to stone, and then from the portal that turned him immortal, a bunch of monsters came out of it, and now we're in Costa Rica, okay. So in no joke, the first 4 minutes of the movie, we go from Ninja Turtles to ancient warrior monster battle to some random cartel in Central America. I hate to be so harsh off the bat, but could the pacing have been any more horrible? They then eventually run into the ghost of the jungle, who we learn to be Leonardo. April O'Neil is here now, so that's cool, I guess.
She is such a bad bitch.
She then falls into the arms of Leonardo, which I wouldn't have known this if they didn't give me that title card. That's why I write the names of my loved ones on their forehead so I can remember who they are. But in all seriousness, if this movie expects for you to know all this stuff about the Ninja Turtles, why are they giving us the names of them in a card? We then catch up with what the other turtles are doing, and it turns out they have jobs now. Donnie does tech support.
No, I'm not playing hard to get. I'm telling you, sir, it's not that kind of phone line.
I'm over here stroking my dick. I got lotion on my dick right now. I'm just stroking my shit. I'm horny as fuck, man. I'm a freak, man.
Why would he take a job like that?
Oh, maybe it's because you abandon your family! Mikey does birthday parties, and Raphael is secretly a vigilante called the Night Watcher. Their whole family is essentially in limbo, not really being able to do their traditional Ninja Turtle thing because Leo just ghosted his family in Brazil.
Splinter sent me down here to become a better leader.
And you're doing so how? We then finally get our first really good scene of the movie. It's this beautifully animated sequence of Michelangelo skating down the sewers, and the animation, the music, the whole style of this whole scene just makes it so amazing. And just to clarify, this whole movie animation-wise is held up very well, and for such a small studio at the time, they did a great job with this. In addition to Leo's absence causing sort of a limbo with the family, it's also caused a lot of friction between them as well. This pretty much leads to every time any turtle interacts with each other, they're always kind of pessimistic and pissed off at each other. It just makes me think they don't even like one another. They literally aren't nice to each other the entire movie until the very end. Obviously, brotherhoods and relationships as a whole aren't going to be sunshine and rainbows all the time, but they could have cooled back on all of this tension just a little bit. April arrives back in New York after picking up a statue for her boss that she got down in Brazil. She then calls Casey Jones, played by Chris Evans, who's presumably on a mission to play every comic book character ever conceived. He's supposed to help her deliver one of these statues that she picked up to her boss, Mr. Winters.
This is my associate, Casey.
Yeah, she's definitely cheating on you. The statue turns out to be one of the stone warriors named Aquile or whatever.
But they're like family to me.
Gee, I wonder who the villain is. We then learn that Mr. Winters has hired the Foot Clan to capture the monsters, presumably, that were teased in the opening of the movie. While Raph is taking down a robber, he runs into Casey.
How'd you know it was me?
Wasn't that hard, man. You know, you look like a big metal turtle.
At least they're aware. There's a pretty solid scene of Raph and Casey having a heart-to-heart where they talk about each other's problems, specifically Raph with Leo. And while this is a decent scene, one of my issues with this movie taking place in the middle of a story is that I'm not entirely invested in these versions of the Turtles, and regardless if you think that this is the Turtles from the 90s movies or not, this movie hasn't done a solid enough job at laying the groundwork for all of these characters. It really just gives you a semi-update on them. We're not spending a whole lot of time with them. The plot has been moving at 1,000 miles per hour, so we've never had really time to slow down. Like, what is Raph and Leo's relationship like prior to this? You're just telling me and not showing me anything. Cut back to Mr. Winters, and he's awakening one of the Stone Generals. Leonardo finally returns home to New York after years of, I don't know, searching for a big booty Latina down in Central America. He's welcomed back by Splinter, but once again, because he ghosted his family for no reason, he's forbidden to fight. Leo's then welcomed back by his brothers, and I actually like this sequence because they're being nice to each other for once. As the Turtles are catching up, they see the Foot Clan, who's taking on one of the monsters from earlier in the film. Might add that this entire sequence is done very well. I love the look of the scene. Before anything else can happen, the Stone Generals arrive, but the Turtles eventually fleeing back into the sewers because remember, they're not supposed to be fighting.
Cody is going to break up with Donna. I just know it.
Okay, that one got me, I'm not gonna lie. Splinter then scolds the Turtles for fighting after finding out what they did on the news. The film's writers realized they were running out of time, so we get a montage of the Foot gathering all of the different monsters. Okay, I know this movie's 15 years old, but people were not reading the newspaper in 2007. Raph and Casey spot the Foot and the Stone Warriors catching one of the monsters, but they accidentally draw their attention.
feel so good.
I don't feel so good.
While Raph and Casey are fending them off, the police show up and the Stone Warriors flee.
I gotta hand it to you, Raph. You sure know how to show a lady a good time.
Huh? I mean, what the fuck? Every time I come over here, you always gotta take me through this homosexual rigmarole, man.
Everyone shows up to April's apartment to check on Raph, and the stone ninja star looking thing that's stuck in his shell is connected to the 3,000-year-old story that we learned to the beginning of the movie, which April tells to us again, this time just straight up giving away who the villain of the movie is like we didn't already know this. Leo and Raph get into another fight about whether they should go after Winters, so Raph goes his own way while the turtles go search up on what's gonna happen when this portal that was set up in the beginning of the movie opens. Not only will a bunch of monsters be unleashed that will take over not only the entire city but the entire world, but it'll also turn Winters and his stone warriors on immortal, effectively killing them. I know this sounds like a lot, because it is. The pacing of this film is just terrible, I'm sorry. There is so much going on in such a fast amount of time. For a standalone film that was supposed to revitalize the Turtles franchise on the big screen, I'm not at all invested in this story or the character so far. Now the Stone Generals are planning on tricking Winters into thinking that they acquired the last monster, so the portal doesn't open and they lose their immortality. While this is going on, Raph is being a good Samaritan and helping out this local diner where one of the monsters is. Good guy Raph is trying to give this guy his money back before anything can happen. Leo throws a fucking knife through it. Dude, what the heck? He worked hard for that. But this shot does go kinda crazy though, I'm not gonna lie. This then leads to one of the most iconic scenes in Ninja Turtle history, that being the fight between Raph and Leo. It is so well animated, it's so well done as a whole, it's shot beautifully, it looks great, it still holds up, but I do have issues with it. It has nothing to do with the animation or the performances, because if you just watch this scene on its own, it works perfectly fine. It's everything that surrounds it.
I'm gonna give you one chance to just walk away and stop this vigilante nonsense.
Yeah, stop doing exactly the thing that I do. Time to go on a little tangent because oh boy do I want to give my opinion on this. TMNT 2007 has the absolute worst interpretation of Leonardo. He is nothing but a whiny throughout this entire movie. I could partially accept the character if he was like, you know, in the right, but he's not. Not only is he being hypocritical as in this scene, but the entire reason that Raph is even doing this is in good intentions, picking up the slack that Leo left behind because he was dicking around in South America for over a year. If it wasn't for Leo, Raph wouldn't even be doing this right now. It's like the movie wants you to side with Leo, but I don't know anyone who actually would. He's so clearly in the wrong and such a hypocrite. I can't stand him. And once again, I do want to stress that the scene is still very well done. The voice actors are turning in amazing performances. It looks beautiful. It's just that what they're fighting about makes no sense at all. And with the lack of character work in this movie, I don't really care about these versions of the Turtles and their problems. It's just been plot, 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 and oh yeah, Raph and Leo don't like each other, but why? What's happened? Why should I care? Raph eventually bests Leo, and after realizing that he nearly killed his brother, he runs off. Leo is then eventually captured by the Stone Warriors, who plan on using him as the pawn 13th monster. Raph then talks to Splinter about his fight with Leo.
Does not mean that you are my least favorite son.
That would be Michelangelo, he's kind of a pussy. The Turtles then set off to save Leo, close the portal, and save the day. By the way, this whole fight sequence right here is super well done. It's all one take, and I heard it took forever for them to do this. They then immediately save Leo.
I'm gonna need these if you're gonna lead us out of here. I'm gonna need you too.
Winters and the Foot Clan then team up with the Turtles to stop the Stone Warriors' plan, and with their help they eventually find the 13th monster and the day is saved. What the hell? Why did you push her? Now that the curse has officially been lifted, Winters is finally able to die.
Whole lot of read. Whole lot of read.
With the day saved, the Turtles run across the New York street tops and the movie ends. So that was TMNT 2007, and it wasn't great. I know this movie's had a resurgence in popularity lately, with a lot of people giving it its flowers, and there's definitely a lot of good elements of this movie. It is visually stunning and is held up very well considering it was by a very small animation studio, and this is over 10 years ago. There are a lot of great ideas in this movie, and I think if you actually executed on a lot of these elements, it could have made for a masterpiece of a Turtles film, but they ultimately failed because they didn't get the execution down. The emotional core of this movie being Leo going to train in South America, leaving his family to struggle, is super interesting and makes for great drama, but they never go into it. We don't really know what the characters are actually feeling. We're told that they're struggling and that they're sad and that they can't move on, but we don't see it. The biggest issue with this film is its screenplay. I am shocked it made it to the screen the way it was. I've never watched a movie that feels more like a first draft. I was just never able to get invested in either the characters or the plot, because one, we barely spend time with any of the characters. There are so many, we have to focus on so many, we never get to spend a proper amount of time with any of of them. And with the plot moving at 1,000 miles per hour, going between the past and the present, going to the Turtles and Winters, realizing that they didn't explain enough and dump a bunch of exposition on you in the middle of the movie, it leads to the film being extremely clunky. I find it hard to believe that a kid would watch this movie and understand what the heck is going on. The bones, the concept of this movie are super interesting and dense, but the meat that surrounds it is all rotten. But hey, as a nice coat of paint, I guess. I truly think this film should have followed in the style of the 1990 film, and heck, even the 2014 movie, as crazy as that may sound. In terms of establishing this world, these characters and their relationships together, say what you want about the Michael Bay Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles films, but at least their relationship was at least believable. And especially in the 1990 movie, you truly feel for them. They feel like actual real characters with real problems. The plot isn't overly convoluted, it's stupid, yes, because this is Ninja Turtles, but this just gets it completely wrong. It dumps us in the middle of the story, and I do not care if anybody says that this is a legacy sequel. Outside of that memory wall, which I amount to nothing but Easter eggs, this movie doesn't tie into the past films in any way. I don't know these versions of the turtle characters, so therefore I'm just not invested, and I don't think audiences were either. While debuting at #1 at the box office for its opening weekend, the movie only made around $95 million worldwide, which on a budget of $34 million, not accounting the marketing, I'm sure made them a small profit or just simply broke even. The film sits at a 34% on Rotten Tomatoes, which, yeah, that's not great, but believe it or not, this movie was slated to get a sequel. It's kind of up in the air exactly what the sequel was going to be. What was definitive though was that the Shredder would return, with one idea of the film being a loose adaptation of City at War, a 13-part comic book saga, where Michelangelo would have fallen out with the Turtles and joined the Foot Clan, but this in-house poster at Imagi suggests otherwise, with Michelangelo holding demutated versions of the Turtles and Splinter. While these ideas sounded interesting, Imagi needed the money in order to make the movie, and with TMNT bringing in minimal profits, it was up to their next movie, Astro Boy, to bring in some extra cash to the studio. That didn't happen. Astro Boy bombed hard, only making $42 million at the box office worldwide, and that was the final nail in Imagi's coffin. It also didn't help that the same year as Astro Boy's release, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were purchased by Nickelodeon. This lost Imagi the film rights to the Ninja Turtles, and they effectively shut down. Well, I don't want to speak too ill on Imagi or TMNT or even Astro Boy. Something I've noticed about their work is that it's extremely action-oriented, with overall lackluster stories and screenplays. There seems to be a lot more focus on the style over the substance of the film, and sometimes, even with animated movies, we need something with just a little heart. I'm not calling TMNT soulless or just a cash grab, because it seems like there were genuine people who cared about this movie and wanted it to be the best it could be. But ultimately, it just wasn't the best it could be. TMNT is an over-convoluted, messy film with some great animation and performances and a really intriguing emotional core, but just buried in a pile of garbage. And it really sucks because I could truly see how this movie could have been a masterpiece. As I mentioned earlier in the video, there were Ninja Turtles movies that would follow, those being the Michael Bay films. Although those films are live action, it's not the end of animated Ninja Turtles films being released theatrically, because next year in 2023, we'll be receiving Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, the first CGI Ninja Turtles film since this one, produced by Seth Rogen and from the director of Mitchell's vs. the Machines. I'm so excited that the Turtles are getting another shot at this medium theatrically, and I really hope that this one will knock it out of the park. TMNT might not be that masterpiece it could have been, but it may be the building block towards something truly special.
Wonder what you want right now, wonder what you want right now. Used to be proud about, used to be proud about it. Counting all my blessings and count my dollars. Make it all better tomorrow, I'll tell you how, bro. If you see me after